Hello people of YouTube, Srsly here, and today I'm going to begin my guide to Dark Souls 2. And the first portion of the video will cover things Betwixt and Majula. But before I get started with the new game, I'm going to give you a few beginner's topics while the cutscene plays in the background. So, the first rule of Dark Souls is never let your stamina bar drop to 0, or in this case, let it drop to its minimum. Because if you do that, then you will be subjected to a slight cooldown in between when it starts to begin regenerating again and when you ended. That is longer if you would simply let it drop down to a point where there's barely a bit of stamina left. This is really important on bosses as well as enemies, because if you run out of stamina, then obviously you won't have any ability to roll out of the way, put up your shield to defend yourself, and in all likelihood you will take damage and possibly die. Okay, in Dark Souls, the game doesn't really do a very good job of telling you what things work and how they work. So I'll go ahead and tell you that Endurance is one of the things that you can level up to increase your max stamina bar, versus Vitality, which levels up your maximum equip load. And while Endurance increases your maximum stamina bar, allowing you to perform more actions, leveling up Vitality increases your max percentage equip load, which allows you to recover your stamina quicker. Meaning, if you level up Endurance a bunch, then you can have an increased amount of attacks that you can perform, but you'll have to wait longer between when you can use them, versus if you level up Vitality a lot, then you can regenerate stamina very quickly, giving you a greater chance to avoid attacks if you should waste your full stamina bar, or at least get it down to its near minimum, and giving you a better chance of dodging attacks and allowing you to get more in between times. Also, it makes traveling around a lot easier because your stamina bar will regenerate faster, allowing you to run further, or run at more frequent intervals versus if you just leveled up Endurance. Fall damage in this game is affected by your percentage max equip load. So, say, if you have your max equip load percentage at 75% versus, like, say, 25%, then you'll take considerably more damage than if you had just equipped your armor, shield, and sword, and maybe even rings, and simply done that instead of just dropping down, which may have resulted in your death. This isn't terribly important for my strategy guide, but it can be important if you decide to play on your own later, because you may not have leveled up health enough, and there is a pit of Majula where you will need to drop down, and you will lose a good deal of your health. So it's a good idea if you haven't leveled up your vigor, which increases your health, too much, to equip your armor and other things which substantially increase your equip load percentage. Okay. Feeding off of that, always keep your max equip load percent at less than 50, because past 50 you'll, as I haven't mentioned yet, but elaborate on very shortly, your stamina and endurance regeneration is affected by your max equip load percentage. So at past 50% it substantially drops off, and your quick rolls will start to become slower and slower, granting you fewer immunity frames and a smaller chance of avoiding attacks. So it's better to keep your equip load percentage low, because it's better to avoid attacks altogether rather than tanking them, especially on New Game Plus. Also, there are a number of weapons in this game that do not scale with strength, but instead scale with dexterity. Dexterity weapons will only increase their damage when you upgrade dexterity, and are not affected by strength whatsoever. There are a number of weapons in the game. I do not really know too many of them, except for rapiers, which is on the screen right now, and a number of different lances, which I won't be using, and I won't recommend that you use, unless you are going for PvP or dex build. Another thing is all spells in this game require a catalyst. A catalyst is a special type of weapon which allows you to use spells, without which you won't be able to use spells at all. Additionally, certain catalysts provide bonuses to weapons, to spells, because some of them affect pyromancies. Well, not pyromancies. Pyromancies are a different kind of magic. Affect things like spells which inflict fire damage, poison damage, etc. Because all weapons and armor in this game have different effects and are affected by different things. It's not just one set value, like not having a set defense for this certain thing or a attack for this certain damage. Additionally, there are a number of NPCs throughout the game that you can talk to, and every time you meet a new NPC, it's a good idea to exhaust their dialogue to the very end. And the way to tell if you've exhausted their dialogue is if you keep talking to them over and over again, they'll just keep saying the same thing over and over again, and won't ever change it. So, once you've exhausted their dialogue, then they have a chance to start spelling special items, or they might warp over to Majula, which is the hub world of the game, and start spelling things from there instead of the area where you previously met them. Now, this isn't true for all NPCs, but it's true for the majority, I would say. So make sure to talk to all NPCs that you see. This game has a lot of gestures in it, and the way you access it using an Xbox 360 controller is to hit the back button to the left of the central Xbox button in the middle of your controller, and from which you'll have a wide selection of gestures to choose from. And to switch them out, if you enter into the gesture menu and then hit Y on onto a gesture, then you'll be able to use it. Or to switch it out with a different gesture, which you can acquire from shrines, other NPCs, and various things throughout the game.
Feast upon their soul.
There also is an ability to two-hand your weapon, or in some cases even your shield, and doing so will give you a 20 to 30% damage increase, in addition to allowing you to use your new weapon that your weapon that you're two-handing as a shield, which will block a minimal amount of damage. Sorry, stop to type my name. Alright. And the only time you should use two-handed weapons for shields is if it's a boss or enemy that you're confident that won't kill you if you happen to tank more than, say, 3 attacks from it. In other cases, you just want to use your shield.
It's a human effigy.
Also, you always want to keep your health well above half, because past half you'll start to do worse, you'll play more cautiously in addition to enemies killing you much more quickly. It's always good to keep your health above half on high damage enemies, because it's possible they can two hit you, maybe even 3 hit you in some cases if you get chain attacked. So it's always good to keep your health above half. Also, pick Warrior or Knight as your starting class, because this is a melee build, not a Sorcerer or Pyromancer build.
Come here for the same reason.
One last thing for beginners. You always want to avoid taking damage, if it means that you will do a little less damage in the process. For example, if you're attacking a boss and you know you can get 3 hits on them, but you'll get hit on the 3rd attack, avoid hitting them for the 3rd attack in favor of dodging out of their attack, because it's much better to avoid taking damage than it is to give damage, unless it's a last hit on an enemy, in which case there's no reason to worry about that. Okay, a few more things for people who are returning to the series but are new to the second game that are different from the other games. Humanities and Embers have been replaced with Human Effigies, which will turn you human upon use, restore your maximum health percentage, which decreases every time you die, down to a minimum of 50%, and allow you to summon NPCs like in other games. In fact, there's one right up here past the fireplace and up the stairs, and a chest at the top. Notice how I'm no longer green and shriveled, but I'm human. Yes, and also my maximum health percentage is at max. every time you die, your maximum health percentage will go down by 5%, so after 10 deaths, you'll go down to your minimum at 50. But I don't recommend letting yourself get down that far, and only using a human effigy after 4 or 5 deaths, so you're at like 80 to or 75 to 80% of your max health, or directly before a boss, because it's always good to have as much health as you can for bosses. Additionally, the humanity counter in the top left of your screen to the left of your health bar has been replaced, because, well, of course, they removed humanities, with a much more underpowered and nerfed version of human effigies. This also entails things like, or this also includes things such as using humanities to, say, kindle a bonfire for more Estus Flask uses, more on that in a minute, and you can no longer use them to reverse hollowing because you use human effigies instead. Okay, Estus Flasks. So Estus Flasks can no longer be upgraded at bonfires like I just said, but instead can only be upgraded by giving Estus Flask shards to the Emerald Herald, who will meet in Majula temporarily, or momentarily. And Estus Flask shards in this game are actually pretty rare. There are only 12 of them in existence, and you can only level up your Estus Flask to a maximum of 12 uses in this game. And the extra Estus Flask usage, well, actually, the Emerald Herald gives you an Estus Flask right off the bat, so you only need to give her 12 shards in order to reach your maximum usage amount. So there's an extra Estus Flask, but it's a very hard to reach location, and I will be skipping it for this run. Okay, this is a very precise jump. Hold B, hold your left stick forward, and tap it once in order to jump, and do the same on the return trip. Face where you're going, hold B, move forward, and tap. Right. On to the tips that I have to offer. In addition to upgrading your Estus Flask at the Emerald Herald with Estus Flask shards, what you can do is upgrade it, just like in the first game, but now you have a different method of going about that, which requires you to use Sublime Bone Dust and put it into the Farfire, which is the bonfire located in Majula, which will give you an extra 50 health per upgrade, up to a maximum of 800, starting at a minimum of 550, meaning there are 5 Sublime Bone Dusts throughout the world in total. Not like the Estus Flask shards, where there's 1 extra. Sorry, stop to flip the page there. Alright. Oh yes, perhaps the biggest addition to the game is, well, it's not a huge change, but it's still very important, is the addition of a hub world, or 2 hub worlds actually, in the form of Majula and the Shaded Forest bonfire. Majula, as we just entered, is a place that links to the 4 areas of the game which you'll need to be going to in order to obtain the 4 Lord Souls. 4 Lord Souls in this game are kind of like the 2 Bell Towers from the first game, or the 5 Kings from the third game, in that you need to kill them in order to progress to the final areas of the game. More on that in future videos, but just remember that for now. And another big change to the game, and one I'm sure you've heard earlier, or that I've mentioned before and you've hopefully listened to, is that every time you die, your maximum health goes down by 5%, down to a minimum of 50. And again, you should use a human effigy before this occurs, or just equip the Ring of Binding, which you'll be finding in Hades' Tower of Flame, to keep yourself up well above 70% of your max HP. And that is it for my tips for beginners or otherwise, and I'm sure I'll be mentioning some more tips along the way, but for the time being, that's all I have to offer. Okay. Actually, I can think of one right off the bat. After lighting this bonfire, you need to continue on in the game, but the thing about lighting bonfires in this game is that when you light them, you don't automatically rest at them, so you aren't forced to spawn in every single enemy that you've killed up to that point, meaning that you can just simply light them and continue on your way as normal. This is really nice because then you don't have to fight your way through all the enemies that you've likely killed up to that point, but instead you can just continue on without being forced to kill every single enemy in a very monotonous way. Inside this house is a talking cat called Shakwa,
Oh.
and she sells you two very important items in the game. She sells you the Silver Cat Ring and the Homer Bones,
Nothing suits.
both of which you'll get after killing the second optional boss of the game, the Pursuer. Oh yes, make sure to hit the stone in the well because it'll raise up a body which will give you the first shard of the game. Meaning that you can start off the game once you talk to the Emerald Herald with 2 Estus Flash shard, or 2 Estus Flash uses. Ignore this guy right here, and because he doesn't give you anything of value except for a shield which you aren't required to get because you'll be getting a much better shield here in the next video anyways. After doing all those prerequisites, go ahead and use all the souls that you've collected up to this point to increase your amount to about 2,000, and then speak with the Emerald Herald.
Are you or better?
Let's skip through the text because I reckon you can just read it on your own if you want.
Seek. There's one.
Once
so
you
that
play the game for yourself, that is.
is here to see. However,
After all, this is a guide. I'm assuming that you're watching this so that way you can get a good feel for the game, not so you can read the text. Of course, I won't skip through the cutscenes, but simply because I consider those a good part of the game. But if you do want to read the text, it's always on the wiki. Alright, and with that is the end of the first video. Hopefully you join me back next time, where I'll be going through the Forest of the Fallen Giants, through the first 2 optional bosses. Till then.